everyone. This is Lauren Comer from Nice in Contact Product Marketing. I'm excited to be sharing a presentation with you today alongside Paul Liljenquist of Focus Services, Raging versus Raving Fans, Tilting the Scales of Agent Engagement. And Paul is going to be sharing a plethora of experience and firsthand knowledge on how to engage and overcome your major roadblocks in performance management in your contact center. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul. He'll introduce himself in a little more detail and kick it off. Let's go.
Lauren, thank you for the introduction. Thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate you attending this session, Raging versus Raving, Tilting Scales of Agent Engagement. So we're going to jump in, kind of give you a brief introduction via the agenda, and then dive into the presentation. So first of all, we're going to give an intro on Focus Services, our BPO, then talk about the operational pain points that we've been facing, our proposed solution, and then the actual results, the actions we took and the results that we saw from that. So like Lauren said, my name is Paul Liljenquist, CEO and co-founder of Focus Services. I have 12 years of call center experience working in a lot of different areas. A 12-year customer of Nice in Contact, so have used them for a long time and a lot of experience with them globally throughout the world, and really spend a lot of my time and effort and energy as the CEO of Focus on employee engagement and putting our agents first and always in the business and always trying to figure out how to make them raving fans versus raging employees that eventually leave the business. So with that being said, wanted to give a quick introduction about Focus. We're headquartered in Utah, just north of Salt Lake City. We've been in operation for over 25 years. We've got roughly 3,200 employees globally with 14 different locations throughout the US, Central America, the Philippines, and Europe. The majority of our work is inbound consumer and business services. We operate sales, tech support, customer service, retention, collections, back office, a number of different services, and we operate in a number of different industries: telecom, cable, financial services, retail, hospitality, online and offline as well. So with that said, just wanted to give an introduction and kind of dive into the whole point of this presentation. The biggest challenges we face as call center companies, and Focus is no different, particularly as a BPO, kind of come in 5 different areas. So our biggest pain points revolve around a few different things. So first of all, I wanted to talk about disparate data. So we have challenges with a number of different systems in the call center space, and the data resides in all these systems. None of it talks to each other. And that is a major pain point for call centers when we're trying to run a holistic operation. The second pain point we face is around delayed access, this idea of getting the data late. We get a lot of data that comes in after the fact, and that's hard. That doesn't allow us to make real-time decisions, and it naturally leads to other problems. One of the biggest being limited visibility, where our employee base, predominantly our management, but eventually our agents, they have no visibility into the data. And so in many cases, we're flying blind. And that becomes a major pain point as we're trying to drive performance in the call center, which naturally leads kind of this domino effect, this negative domino effect, to reactive management, where if we don't have the data and when we do get it, it's getting to us late, and we only have a certain level of visibility, well, we're naturally going to be reactive in how we manage our people, be it senior management all the way down to the individual agent. And so this reactive management causes kind of this 5th and final pain point that we face, which is detached employees. And in this case, detached agents, because that's where the majority of these employees sit. So these are the 5 major pain points that we face. I believe all call centers face, but certainly Focus faces and has faced in the past. And we wanted to figure out ways to solve these pain points. So what did we do? Well, the first thing we did is we identified where this data sits and the challenges with this data. We have both system data that's very disparate in multiple different systems. And then we have human data. We have a lot of information about the individual agent that is very disparate. And we wanted to be able to pull that information together and figure out ways to improve the overall operation. And that's what CXone Performance Management has done for us. So, or what we hoped it would do for us. And I will talk to you about the results of how it's done that for us. But essentially what we wanted to do with CXone Performance Management was, first of all, we wanted to take all this diagnostic data that sits inside these disparate systems and aggregate it and put it all into one application. And that's essentially what we were able to do with CXone Performance Management. We were able to take ACD data, CRM data, QM data, workforce data, data warehouse data, numerous data sets, and bring it into one application. From that diagnostic data, we were able to kind of marry up, the hope is to marry up that data and then be able to start making decisions and firing out prescriptive outputs. And that's essentially what we started to do with CXone Performance Management. And it allowed us to start firing human behaviors, prescriptive behaviors, to our employees, to our managers, as well as our individual agents. Now, as we fired off that prescriptive data via coaching sessions, dashboards, the marketplace, and so on, we were able to then pull that those diagnostic inputs from the employee side back into the application and look for ways to continue to enhance the overall operation. And we were able to do that through monitoring their performance, monitoring their messaging and messaging back and forth at them and seeing how they liked the application. We were able to do surveys. We were able to look at game results and game mechanics to see how our agents and our employees were responding to these prescriptive behaviors. And through that, we were able to kind of close this loop with the ability to start driving behavioral change at the system level as well. So kind of systemic behaviors. And that's really why we chose CXone Performance Management as the solution to solve these different pain points. One, to enhance system behaviors, through kind of this closed loop process. And then two, to improve the overall human experience by driving relatedness with our employees, by driving competence where we were developing them, and then providing them autonomy and allowing them to really own their own business. So essentially what CXone Performance Management is allowing us to do is to take disparate data, delayed access, limited visibility, reactive management, and detached agents, and funnel those pain points through the application and essentially solve it through smart connected data, through real-time decision-making, enterprise crowdsourcing, preemptive behaviors, and prescriptive activities. Now, I'm going to go into each one of these and talk to you about how each of these particular each of these particular items solved a pain point and what were the results that actually came out of that particular exercise. So first and foremost, I wanted to talk about smart connected data. So the first thing we did is we started to tie as many different systems into CXone Performance Management as we could. And so we started out with our InContact ACD. We pulled in our CRM application, and keep in mind, as a BPO, we have multiple clients, so we have multiple CRMs feeding in. Our QM workforce data, we also have a homegrown data warehouse, and so we started feeding all this data into the application. Now, just by having smart connected data, we were able to start seeing connections. We were able to start seeing how workforce data was impacting time clock data, and how if we could marry up our HRIS time clock system with the ACD data, now I could get a true visual of what's going on from a utilization standpoint, right? Because with call centers, the first thing that drives any and all profitability is labor. And if I can get my labor, one, if I can hire enough labor to handle the work, that's mission critical. First thing that has to happen. But the second thing is they have to come to work. And so when we talk about utilization, we're talking about the amount of hours that our agents actually delivered based on the projections that we thought we could get out of them as full-time equivalents. And so by marrying up our time clock data with our ACV data, we were able to see these gaps. We were able to drive that level of visibility through the organization. And we saw a 26% increase in agent utilization, which for us was just enormous when you think about that being spread out across 3,200 employees and 14 different locations. So agent utilization was first and foremost. First thing we tackled was get people hired and then get them into the building. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about is real-time decision-making. So what we did here was one of the biggest challenges we face in operating call centers is the real-time nature of the business. It's such a fast-moving business. And we have always felt that performance management is all about real-time course correction. If I can make real-time decisions on the fly in the moment, then I'm more likely to succeed versus, finding out about something after the fact and trying to make amends for actions that have already taken place. It's just too hard. Think about an agent who goes 0 for 30 on their phone calls and they just destroy conversion for the entire floor or service level or average handle time or whatever it is. More than likely that agent isn't going to come back, right? They're going to quit and leave, or they're going to quit and stay. But either way, you've kind of lost them. But if I can catch that agent when they've gone 0 for 5, and I essentially can lay down virtual rumble strips that will help that agent course correct and get them back on the path, well, then I'm more likely to save that individual agent, but I'm also more likely to drive just better overall performance of the floor because I'm making these real-time quick decisions and course correcting and learning in the moment versus learning from the past. And so with the real-time decision making that CXone Performance Management has allowed us to do, we can now see queues real time. We can see service level real time. We can see agent performance, conversion rates real time because we're pulling in that CRM data. We can see their quality data real time, so I can quickly pull them off and do a coaching session if they've broken down in a certain area. So the real time component of managing a call center has tremendous impact on the overall performance. Now, in our particular case, there were two areas that we saw a lot of benefit from. The first one was after call wrap time. We identified areas where agents were dragging out their after call wrap, and it was essentially increasing the average handle time of the call. But that was also raising or lowering the amount of calls per hour that they could take. So it was causing problems for us in a number of different ways. And so by having that real-time view into the data, we could quickly see after call wrap times. We could adjust for those and uptrain agents to get better at those particular things, which naturally reduced our average handle time. And as we all know, when you can reduce average handle time, your calls per hour naturally goes up. Your agents can take more calls, which means you need fewer agents for the amount of calls that you're handling on a daily basis. And as your business grows, you don't have to hire as many agents either because they're just that much more productive. So for us, the real-time decision making was huge, and we just saw tremendous results from that. And as we have moved to a much more at-home environment during this COVID-19, having these real-time stats in front of our agents has been phenomenal. It's been just an incredible advantage for us. Next, I want to talk about enterprise crowdsourcing and this idea of scoreboards. So this is kind of pain point number 3, which is this idea of limited visibility. So we're huge fans of scoreboards, of making data visible. You think about going to a sports game, and man, to think that there's not been college football this fall, or half the countries know college football, it's kind of crazy to me. But think about going to a football game or a basketball game or baseball game or whatever, and there's no scoreboard. The game just isn't as engaging. The attendees and participants aren't as engaged. And so just the introduction of a scoreboard makes a huge difference in the overall engagement and participation in the performance. And so what we did is we used CXone Performance Management's dashboards essentially as a scorecard, as a scoreboard, which allowed us to drive visibility throughout the entire organization. Now I could have dashboards at the executive level, the senior management level, junior management level, all the way down to the individual agent. And so this idea of aggregated data sitting in a real-time environment with global dashboards, enterprise dashboards throughout the entire organization made a huge difference in our overall buy-in, our adoption, our agent engagement, and it had a huge impact on overall performance. Because what happened is, in this particular case with training, as our agents saw their results and they could have a true view into their individual performance, they proactively went out and sought up training. They went out and did their own e-learnings. They spent more time in our FAQs and in our knowledge base. They talked to their agents more. They paid attention more in pre-shifts. And so when you have a more engaged agent who comes to work, and when they're at work, they become more productive, well, naturally, everything gets better. It's a domino effect. You don't need as many agents for the same amount of calls you're taking. They're more productive. You can pay them more, and they don't leave, which is a huge driver of cost. This idea of training costs, up training costs, and growth training or attrition training, all those things start to reduce because you have an engaged employee in the site. So this idea of enterprise crowdsourcing, dashboards out to the entire organization, and everybody being bought in and everybody sharing ideas versus your select few management and senior executives having all the data. That was a huge breakthrough for us, and another huge pain point relieved as we move to CXone Performance Management. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about was preemptive behaviors. This idea of tackling the reactive manager. And this is where we started to incorporate in targeted and real-time coaching sessions, where we started to drive surveys, where we started to look deeper into QA results. And what it allowed us to do is just become more preemptive. So instead of being a reactive manager and having data late, I could now feed this data real time and holistically to our frontline managers and empower them to effectively be much more proactive than reactive. They could get with an agent before that agent went 0 for 5. They could get with that agent before they drove off the road. Those virtual rumble strips not only drove preemptive, proactive behaviors at a management level, but then it started to drive those same behaviors at an individual agent level. So this idea of preemptive behaviors has been huge for us, and it drives a sense of empowerment. So for us, one of the biggest things that it did for us is it allowed us to drive up bill rate. So I'll give you a few examples. So the first one is our pay per call campaigns, where we get paid on a per call basis with qualifiers like quality and service level and so on. So you can't sacrifice these other metrics to just drive up call volume. But we knew that if we could increase the amount of calls taken per agent per hour, our bill rates would naturally increase. And so that's where we started driving things like after call wrap, where we started identifying areas where agents were breaking down on our quality forms, and it was slowing up the call. And so we started finding windows where we could maintain quality while lowering average handle time, which naturally drove up calls per hour. And as we drove up calls per hour, bill rate naturally increased. So that was one example of what we did with our pay-per-call models. Now with our hourly models, most of our hourly models have bonus targets tied to them around service level, around average speed of answer, conversion rate, retention rate, and so on. No different there. We just changed the focus. And so the focus was more around better offer rates. If we were going to drive conversion, let's focus more on offer rate and get more preventative and preemptive in how we train. So just an example on conversion. Same thing with average handle time and ACW. If we could drive that same level of performance and we could reduce those particular numbers, well, naturally service level is going to go up because your agents are sitting more available and they're able to take more calls. So by driving this preemptive analysis and pushing out behaviors proactively, we were able to have huge success from a bill rate perspective. And you can imagine as bill rates are going up, your top line revenue is going up and your labor cost is going down. And so the margin in between just grows exponentially. It's phenomenal. Now, lastly, I wanted to talk about prescriptive activities and this idea of flow. So this was kind of our final pain point, which was this idea of detached agents who had just checked out. Like I said before, they either quit and leave or they quit and stay. But either way, we've lost them. And the reason why is because they've fallen out of flow. So the idea of flow is this matrix of skill and challenge. And as your skill goes up, if your challenge doesn't go up with it, you become bored and you just kind of quit. You stop working hard. And if your challenge goes up, but your skill remains low, well, then you get stressed out and you can't handle the pressure of the call center. And so really the idea of flow is this constant alignment of skill and challenge. And if I can steadily raise somebody's skill while also steadily raising the challenge, the objective or the goals that we've set for them, then they naturally find this state of flow and they're an attached agent. They're an agent that loves what they're doing. And we see this in so many different areas, be it, video games or movies that we watch, anything that keeps us engaged, keeps us in a state of flow. And that's effectively what this concept of prescriptive activities allowed us to do. We started using CXone performance management to drive specific targeted behaviors at the individual agent level where we could fire out prescriptive outputs by agent. So instead of kind of blanket managing the floor or blanket coaching the floor, we started looking at each individual agent's progression and we started to manage them on an individual by individual basis. And it naturally drove buy-in. Agents started to get into flow. They knew that if we raised their objective, it was justified because their skill level was where it needed to be. And if their objective or challenge became too great, they knew that they were going to get the coaching and development that they needed to make sure that they remained in flow and remained in alignment. So this was a huge one for us. And CXone Performance Management gave us that level of visibility and gave us those skills to drive that particular level of performance. And so what did that do? Well, for us, the biggest thing it did is it drove down our attrition. It had a huge impact on our overall attrition because agents didn't want to leave. They didn't want to leave. They had better performance. They had the competence that they needed, and then they had the autonomy that they needed to go out and actually deliver on the results. So a drop in attrition, like I said before, we drive up bill rates, we drive up revenue, we lower labor costs, and we reap the benefits in between. So just in summary, I wanted to kind of go over these pain points one more time. This idea of disparate data, delayed access, limited visibility, reactive management, detached agents. And we use CXone Performance Management to essentially solve that by driving smart connected data, real-time decision-making, enterprise crowdsourcing, preemptive behaviors, and prescriptive activities. And it has made a huge difference in our business and is having just as big, if not a bigger impact, as the majority of our agents are now operating from home and literally being remote and yet having full connection into the business and full visibility into how the business is doing and how they're individually performing. So with that, I appreciate you joining the session. Appreciate any and all questions that you may have. I'm going to turn the time back over to Lauren and look forward to a fun QA session.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was an awesome presentation. It's so great to hear how your contact center really transformed. I mean, I love hearing things like reduced agent attrition and increased revenue and improved your engagement. So wonderful things to hear. And I hope everyone could take, pieces away for their contact center. With that, we're going to open things up to a live Q&A. Please use the Q&A panel to enter your questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. All right, perfect. So the first question, Paul, that we have was, how do you balance productivity versus burnout with increased workload?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it kind of goes back to that last slide around flow and this idea of flow. I think it's this constant realignment of skill and challenge and incentive. Actually, there's kind of a third axis there, which is incentive. And so, we're constantly looking at our people and running continuation trainings for them. And as their skill level goes up, like anything else, they naturally want more of a challenge. And vice versa, as the challenge goes up, they naturally want to learn more. And so it really allows us to kind of cater across the board, from our nesting agents who are brand new to the floor, to our OJT agents, to our production agents. And so we really kind of, we kind of bucket them in categories based on their time on the floor, their experience. And then we cater a plan for each one of them to help them work through nesting kind of on their own timetable, work through OJT, and eventually get to production as best they can. Now, if you can align that skill and challenge, where as their skill level increases, you're constantly raising their objective. As long as you have the proper incentives in place, people respond to that. And we've seen that not only in outbound sales campaigns, but in inbound customer service, tech support, back office work. So you certainly have to build the plan for each call type and each type of individual, but it absolutely works. And those numbers that we shared, those span across a number of different call types that we take, industries. And but you definitely have to be careful. Obviously, the last thing you want to do is burn out a great rep and they leave, right? That's the whole point of flow, is you want them to stay as long as possible. So overloading them with calls and not giving them any breaks, that's a pain point too. So when I talk about incentives not only maybe dollars or a TV or whatever, it may also be a PTO day. It may also be an extra break that day. So there's a lot of different things you can do to manage the productivity versus burnout.
Great. So the next question that we have is, how do you use gamification to engage different personality types?
Yeah, I think gamification, I think, has been a buzzword for a long time. And I think a lot of people, more and more companies are buying into it. But I think early on, I think people were gamifying the wrong things. And I think that's why it kind of comes and goes in call centers. But I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with flow, this idea that if you can gamify the right metrics, you're more likely to succeed. I think more often than not, we gamify the wrong things. We have the right intentions. We gamify the wrong things. We gamify average handle time, when really we should probably gamify the behavior that drives average handle time, like greeting the customer with enthusiasm or controlling the conversation, whatever. Same thing with like conversion rate. I mentioned that earlier. We gamify conversion when maybe we should be gamifying offer rate, training them on a particular behavior and then gamifying them. I think more often than not, we think that gamifying is more cheerleading, when really I think it's much more around coaching and development. And if you can coach and develop your people and you train them on the proper behaviors of how to be successful on a call, then the game and the incentive that actually comes from them manifesting that behavior really becomes powerful. And that's where the ROI is in my opinion, how gamification should truly work.
Awesome. So in that same vein, we have a question that goes hand in hand. What are some of the types of incentives that you offer to your team?
Yeah, that's it's interesting. So originally we thought we were super smart, and we had plenty of Xboxes and PS4s and TVs on the call floor. And, it's kind of the law of diminishing returns. You can only win so many of those things before you've filled every room in your house. And so we actually, through CXone Performance Management, we survey our agents all the time. We run them through weekly surveys. And it allows us to and we survey them on incentives. We survey them on a lot of things. Are they being coached? Are they being developed? Meet, seat, and greeted, all that kind of stuff. But we also survey them on the types of incentives. And with CXone Performance Management, it's allowed us, there's actually a marketplace in there where we've been able to load in a bunch of different types of incentives. So some of them, they still want the hard good products. Other ones want gift cards. Other ones want PTO days. In the winter months, our agents want parking spots closer to the building. And so those are things that they can reserve and they can buy. We have some agents who they wanted lunch with a vice president or lunch with the president, and so we've done those types of things. So I think you have to listen to your employees and see what motivates them. And the nice thing about the system is it's so flexible that it's allowed us to put a number of different incentives in there based on the interests of the employee.
Yeah, and I think you hit something, really important there, is that a lot of times I talk to contact centers and they're like, well, I don't have budget to give all these incentives. I don't have budget to buy gift cards. And to your point, there are a lot of non-monetary things that really resonate with people and motivate people that, budget aside, you can still do. So I think that's really great.
And just one more point to that. Yeah, you think of like the parking spaces, you think there's certain things that are relatively inexpensive. Probably one of the most popular ones for us has been the avatars within the product, where you can actually go in and create your own avatar, and you can buy them clothing and you can suit them up. And so one of the ways we incentivize our employees is through just digital currency, where we give them digital coins within the application, and then they use that to just soup up their avatar. And we have avatar competitions. We do a lot of fun things like that. It's relatively inexpensive, but to the individual agent, it's a motivator to them.
Mm-hmm. I was personally very excited last spring when avatars could get pets. That was very exciting. So I actually have, the pets are pretty cool. So I had a question that kind of goes hand in hand with the product itself. There's been a couple questions about, the dashboards that you were showing, if that was from what product it was from. Was it from the CXone Dashboards, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so CXone has basic dashboarding, and we have used that in the past, but this particular product is actually CXone Performance Management. So it's kind of an enhanced version of the reporting and analytics. It's fully integrated into the CXone suite of products, but it's valuable for us because it has several more applications. It's got gamification, which obviously we talked about, which has been huge for us. It has coaching, which is another big one, where we can deliver prescriptive coaching sessions and targeted sessions to not only manage what our coaches do to ensure that they're actually coaching, but that we can also ensure that they're coaching on the right things. But it's also allowed us to integrate with non-in-context systems where we can pull in a CRM, we can pull in a data warehouse, We can pull in a legacy data source. So that's been another value add for us. So yeah, it's CXone Performance Management. It's more of an add-on reporting and analytics platform. But for us, it checks so many more boxes than the basic dashboards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, being able to pull in that external data is just so key in creating that single view, really, really improving the visibility for the organization. So Jesper said, thank you for the presentation. But he also wanted to know, looking back at the journey you've made, what are your most important learnings and challenges you've experienced?
Yeah, I think for us, probably the biggest thing is just embracing new technology. The cloud has been huge for us, and in many ways, we were prepared for COVID, which was nice because we were already on the Nice in Contact platform. We were already on the CXone Performance Management platform. So when we had to completely shift and move our agents home, not only did we know that they would have connectivity and they could take the phone calls, but probably just as important, they had full visibility into all of their performance so that we knew that they could continue to carry on the level of performance we expected from them. And so I think it definitely is a journey. And when we started with CXone Performance Management, the first thing we did was just reports. All we did was just aggregate data. We didn't do gaming. We didn't do coaching. We weren't wallboarding. We weren't doing some of those other things. The first thing was let's just aggregate the data and let's just start to consume a little bit at a time. But we very quickly realized that as we married up all this data, we just saw all these connections. We saw, how QA affected average handle time, or how conversion rate affected QA, and that's when we knew we needed to start proactively making the data actionable, where we could see what the problem was, but we wanted to fix it, and then that's when we started adding on additional components to the product, like gamification, coaching, QA, things like that. And so it's definitely been a process, but I don't think anything that I've shared in this presentation is anything new. I think most call centers face these issues, and they've faced them for a long time. And so I think kind of the invite is, or at least from our experience, is don't be afraid of new technology. Get out there and explore it. And quite honestly, Nice in Contact is, they've been a partner of ours for 15 plus years. And I think probably one of the greatest things about the partnership is they always have the latest and greatest technology. So as we come across different problems, it's typically a couple of phone calls and a presentation, and we have a pretty good idea of the next step we need to take in our technology evolution.
Awesome. One question that came in, and I'm hoping that I'm interpreting the question correctly, but they wanted to know how much time it took to train to get up and running in CXone Performance Management.
It's we rolled it out pretty systematically. We did roll it out to agents from day one, but we just had ACD data first. So we just started with one set of data. And because the system's pretty intuitive, it was quickly adopted. Now, we didn't overload them with a ton of different data sets. We started just with the ACD data so they could see kind of their real-time agent states and their average handle time, their ASA, things like that. And then we just slowly added more data sets. We then added CRM data. We then added QM data, workforce data. We now pull in our HRIS data. So all of our time clock data when they clock in, when they walk into the building, or when they clock in from home. So they can see all kind of, like I mentioned earlier, they can see their phone system log time versus their time clock time. And now we can measure utilization and efficiency a lot better. And then we incentivize on a lot of those things. And so we always felt if we can put the the data in front of the agents, they respond. And, I look at these agents now, and the world they live in is so data driven, particularly social media. It's so data driven. And there's so many sources that they look at on a daily basis. I was surprised how quickly they adopted the dashboards and sought for more data to not just the ACD data, but wanting us to get more of the data in there. So they adopted it pretty fast from our experience.
Yeah. And I think you really hit on something there. We've come to expect everything to be real time, right? So it would be crazy for our performance data not to be real time. And that's what agents are wanting. They need that in real time. So last but not least, we have one more question before we wrap things up. When you're looking at coaching and looking at your performers and sort of where you're going to focus your time, do you find that it's most fruitful to focus on your top performers, your middle performers, your bottom performers? You kind of hear a lot of different philosophies around that. And what's your philosophy?
Yeah, look, first of all, every one of them is critical to our success. When you think of attrition and the amount of money that we spend in our businesses to replace an agent, it's killer. So, I'll kind of break them down. So first of all, your brand new agents, they've just come out of training. All they are is an expense to you when they first hit the floor. And so, yeah, you want to recoup that expense as best you can. So with them, particularly in that nesting period, it's super important that we retain them. And so, but at the same time, you can't expect them to perform at the same level as your veterans. And so, through the product, we're able to build customized objectives for them, really trying to create a winnable game. And so that's really the strategy around nesting and OJT to a certain extent. We want to help them get through the learning curve, and we want to help create a winnable game. And so their objectives and goals are going to be lower than what a veteran agent is. But if you can give them a path and they can see a path to truly becoming a veteran productive rep, they're going to stay, especially if they feel that that they're getting developed. And so if they always feel that they're in a state of training and they always feel that they're getting proper development and coaching, there's a greater likelihood that not only are they going to stay, but they're just going to get better at what they do. So nesting and OJT to a certain extent, we treat the same way. When you get into your veterans, though, man, those people are so valuable because, one, they're super consistent in their schedule adherence. They're very consistent in their performance, and if you lose one of those people, not only the physical dollars of replacing them in a training class, but then the months of performance that you lost from getting a new hire to that point it just really hurts as well. So, keeping those production agents, those veteran agents, is just as important. What we found in our data is that we lose the majority of our agents within the first 60 days or about the 9-month mark and beyond. And it's either because they're super stressed out early on when they hit the floor and they give up, or at that 9-month to 12-month mark, they've just gotten bored and they're coasting. And so they just check out. It's like playing a video game. You've played it so many times that you're kind of bored of it and you want to play the next game. And so we've really had to focus on the ends. We've had to really focus on how do we get those nesting OJT agents really bought in, really feeling the love and the development that we provide. But then those veteran agents, how do we keep them engaged at month 12, month 18, month 24? And we use the product, we use CXone Performance Management in both of those areas. For those veteran agents, man, we need their performance, but they also want freedom. They want to be challenged, but they also don't want to be parented all the time. So actually one of the incentives we do for our veteran agents is to not give them coaching sessions, where if they keep their performance over a certain level, we give them more break time than coaching time, and that's an incentive to them. So we've done different things to try to hold on to really all levels of our agents.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for sharing all of your knowledge with us, sharing the experiences of focused services, in general and with CXone Performance Management. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Please make sure you complete the survey after our recording has ended. But we appreciate you. We hope that you continue to enjoy all of the wonderful sessions, the keynotes, and everything that Interactions Live has to offer. So with that, I think we are all set. Thank you again, Paul.
Okay, right on. Thanks.